We often think of the icons of our youth as frozen in time, forever wearing the smile that once lit up our living rooms. Marlo Thomas was the face of a generation, a woman who taught millions that they could be that girl on their own terms. But as the cameras dim and the years pass, a different kind of story begins to unfold behind the scenes. At 88, Marlo is facing a chapter that many didn't see coming, one that isn't about fame or accolades, but about the quiet, heavy reality of time and the legacy we leave behind. What happens when the woman who gave so much of her heart to the world has to find the strength to face her own most difficult transition? To understand the woman Marlo Thomas became, one must first understand the world into which she was born. It was a world dominated by a giant. Her father, Danny Thomas, was not just a comedian or a television star. He was a force of nature, a man whose presence filled every room and whose ambition built St. Jude Children's Research Hospital from a prayer and a promise. Growing up in the Thomas household meant living in the glow of a legend, a psychological landscape where love and duty were inextricably linked. For young Marlo, the challenge was unique. How do you honor a legacy without being consumed by it? Psychologically, this created a profound internal drive. Marlo wasn't just looking for a job in Hollywood. She was looking for an identity that was entirely her own. She observed her father's tireless dedication to the sick and the needy, learning early on that life was measured by what one gave away. However, as she entered adulthood, she felt the weight of expectation, the silent last name that opened doors but also threatened to define her before she could speak for herself. Her early struggles in the industry weren't just about landing roles. They were about resisting the urge to play it safe by following in her father's footsteps. She wanted to be a performer, yes, but she wanted to be a revolutionary. The emotional stakes were high during these formative years. There was a fear that she might only ever be Danny's daughter, a reflection of someone else's light. This fueled a quiet rebellion, a search for a project that would break the mold of the traditional 1960s woman. Marlo was seeking a narrative that didn't exist yet, one where the woman was the hero of her own journey, unattached and unafraid. She was building the psychological armor she would need for the battles ahead, unaware that her greatest challenge was just around the corner. But just as Marlo began to find her footing in Hollywood, she made a choice that would change the landscape of television forever and spark a controversy no one expected. In 1966, Marlo Thomas introduced the world to and Marie in That Girl. Today, the concept of a single woman living alone and focusing on her career seems ordinary, but at the time it was radical. Marlo wasn't just an actress playing a part. She was a producer fighting for a vision. The psychological weight of this role was immense. She became the face of a movement, representing the hopes and anxieties of millions of women who felt trapped by the social expectations of the era. Behind the scenes, the pressure was relentless. Network executives were terrified of a female lead who didn't want to get married. They pushed Marlo at every turn to have and Marie walk down the aisle, believing that a woman's story could only find resolution in a wedding. Marlo's refusal to give in was a display of incredible psychological grit. She understood that if and Marie got married, the message of the show, that a woman is complete on her own, would be lost. This wasn't just a creative disagreement. It was a battle for the soul of the character and, by extension, the autonomy of her audience. The emotional toll was significant. Marlo often felt like she was standing on an island, defending her choices against a tide of tradition. This era shaped her worldview, reinforcing the idea that progress requires a stubborn kind of courage. She watched as her character became a beacon of hope, yet she herself had to deal with the isolation that comes with being a first. She was successful, famous, and influential, but she was also constantly scrutinized. She had mastered the art of the public smile while navigating the exhausting reality of being a trailblazer in a man's world. While her professional life reached its peak, her personal life remained a mystery, until a chance meeting on a talk show set changed her heart in a way she never thought possible. In 1977, Marlo Thomas appeared as a guest on The Phil Donahue Show. What was meant to be a simple promotional interview turned into a moment of genuine human connection that was broadcast to millions. As they sat across from each other, the chemistry was undeniable. Not just a romantic spark, but a meeting of minds. Phil, a pioneer of the audience participation talk show, and Marlo, the feminist icon, found in each other an equal. For Marlo, who had spent a decade asserting her independence, falling in love was a different kind of transformation. Their marriage, which spanned over 40 years, became the psychological anchor of her life. In the high-stakes, often superficial world of celebrity, their bond was a rare sanctuary of stability and mutual respect. Phil provided a safe space where Marlo didn't have to be that girl or the savior of St. Jude. She could simply be herself. This partnership allowed her to transition gracefully into the next phase of her life. As the spotlight on her acting career naturally began to shift, she didn't face the crisis of identity that many stars do. Instead, she leaned into the shared values she held with Phil: intellectual curiosity, social justice, and a deep commitment to family. Together, they navigated the complexities of a blended family and the pressures of two high-profile careers. The emotional depth of their relationship was built on a foundation of quiet power. They weren't a couple that sought the tabloids. They were a couple that sought each other's counsel. Phil's presence allowed Marlo to take over the mantle of St. Jude with a sense of security, knowing she had a partner who understood the weight of the legacy she was carrying. It was a golden era of her life, characterized by a profound sense of belonging and a love that seemed, for a long time, to be untouchable by the hands of time. However, the passage of time is a thief, and soon, the indestructible bond they shared would face its most heartbreaking test. As Marlo entered her later years, her life's work shifted from the screen to the halls of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. While many of her peers were enjoying a quiet retirement, Marlo was assuming a responsibility that would crush most people. She became the National Outreach Director, effectively becoming the face of her father's promise that no child should die in the dawn of life. The psychological reality of this role is staggering. It requires an individual to constantly balance hope with the harsh reality of childhood illness. Marlo didn't just fundraise from a distance. She walked the wards, met the parents, and held the hands of children facing unimaginable battles. This work requires a specific kind of emotional intelligence, the ability to be a pillar of strength for others while processing the personal grief that comes from seeing such suffering. We see the legacy load here. For Marlo, St. Jude is not just a charity. It is a living memory of her father and a debt she feels she owes to the world. The pressure to keep a multi-billion-dollar institution running, ensuring that no family ever receives a bill, is a weight she carries every single day. This period of her life represents a shift from being an icon of style to an icon of service. Yet, the emotional toll is evident. There is a weariness that comes from decades of being the one everyone looks to for hope. The psychological transition from the girl who wanted to change the world to the woman who is tasked with saving it is a heavy one. She navigated these years with a fierce dedication, often pushing her own needs aside to ensure her father's dream remained a reality. But even the strongest pillars can begin to feel the strain of time, especially as the world around them begins to change. Friends were slipping away, and the world Marlo knew was changing rapidly, leading to a series of public appearances that left fans deeply concerned. In recent years, the public conversation around Marlo Thomas has taken a sharp and often unkind turn. As she reached her late 80s, every public appearance became a subject of intense scrutiny on social media. Fans and critics alike began to comment on the physical changes in her face and her increasingly frail appearance. The psychological impact of this kind of public aging shaming is profound, especially for a woman who was once celebrated as the ultimate symbol of youthful vitality. For Marlo, the challenge was twofold. She was dealing with the natural, inevitable process of aging, while simultaneously being held to an impossible standard of timelessness. The internet can be a cruel mirror, reflecting back distorted versions of a person's life. When rumors began to circulate about potential cosmetic surgeries or health issues, Marlo was forced to navigate a modern landscape of gossip that didn't exist during her heyday. The internal resilience required to ignore the noise and continue her work is a testament to her character. She had to process the fact that for some, her legacy was being eclipsed by her appearance. Psychologically, this period highlights the vulnerability of the elderly in the spotlight. In her interviews, fans noticed a slight tremor in her voice and a slowing of her movements, signs of a life that has been lived to the fullest, yet signs that the world often misinterprets as failing. Instead of retreating, Marlo chose to keep showing up, even when she knew the comment section would be unforgiving. This was a different kind of bravery than she showed in the 1960s. It was the bravery of being seen as she is, an 88-year-old woman carrying the weight of a monumental life. But the physical changes were only a small part of the story. A much deeper, more personal loss was about to occur, leaving Marlo to face her 88th year in a way she never imagined. In August 2024, the world learned of the passing of Phil Donahue at the age of 88. For the public, it was the end of a television era. For Marlo Thomas, it was the shattering of her world. After more than 40 years of marriage, her partner, her confidant, and her greatest support was gone. The psychology of grief at 88 is a unique and heavy burden. It is often accompanied by a sense of being the last one, as the peers and loved ones who shared one's history gradually disappear. In the wake of Phil's death, the silence in Marlo's life must have been deafening. Their relationship had been a constant dialogue, a shared journey of activism and family. To suddenly be without that sounding board after 4 decades is a profound psychological trauma. During this time, Marlo largely withdrew from the public eye, emerging only for the most necessary of tributes. When she was seen, the sadness in her eyes was unmistakable. Fans who had once asked, "What happened to her face?" were now struck by the raw, human pain of a woman who had lost her soulmate. This chapter explores the invisible struggle of the elderly survivor. We often forget that behind the celebrity persona is a human being dealing with the same universal experiences of loss and loneliness. Marlo's grief was not a performance. It was a quiet, internal process of relearning how to exist in a world that no longer contained the person who knew her best. The emotional stakes had shifted entirely. It was no longer about career or legacy. It was about the fundamental human challenge of finding a reason to keep moving forward when half of your heart is missing. With her anchor gone, many wondered if Marlo would finally retire and disappear from the world altogether. In the final chapter of this narrative, we find Marlo Thomas at 88, standing at a crossroads. Despite the profound loss of Phil and the physical toll of her years, she has not disappeared. Instead, she has returned to the place where she feels most useful, St. Jude. This decision is the ultimate reveal of her character. It shows a psychological shift from that girl, the one searching for herself, to a woman who has found herself in the service of others. Her transformation is not one of tragedy, but of incredible resilience. The lesson Marlo leaves us with is one of enduring purpose. She has taught us that aging isn't a story of failing, but a story of becoming. She has faced the scrutiny of the world and the heartbreak of personal loss, yet she continues to carry the torch her father lit decades ago. When we look at Marlo Thomas today, we shouldn't try not to cry because of her age or her frailty. If we cry, it should be out of respect for a woman who has outlasted her critics and stayed true to her mission. She is a reminder that the most beautiful part of a person isn't the youthful face we remember from a screen, but the hands that continue to work for others long after the cameras have stopped rolling. The emotional journey reaches its resolution in this realization. Marlo's legacy is not frozen in the 1960s. It is being written right now, in every child helped at St. Jude and every day she chooses to stay engaged with the world. As she moves through her 88th year, she stands as a testament to the power of a life lived with intention. She has shown us that while the body may change and loved ones may pass, the spirit can remain undefeated. As she continues her journey at 88, one question remains. How will you choose to be remembered when the bright lights finally fade? Because, as Marlo has shown us, the real story only begins when the show is over. Keep watching to see how Marlo's legacy is still being written today.